Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with me, your reluctant prophet, Bill Reimer. I've got a doozy for you today, and I'm even going to finish off with a little of Arlo Guthrie from his song Alice's Restaurant. I'm going to give a testimony that won't be written in the blog, so you'll need to watch the video to hear everything, because all of this will not be in written form. I've been teasing out Bing AI to find out data on excessive deaths in unusual categories unrelated to COVID. So here we go. Screw your bum steer seat. You're about to find out some pretty concerning facts. I don't deal in conjecture. I don't deal in conspiracy theories. I don't think there needs to be a conspiracy when everyone believes the same ideological idiocy. Why today's totalizing enterprise originates with the left. The left has completely abandoned the disenfranchised and the working class. The champagne socialists, disguised as champions of the little person, have become their oppressor. Why? Because they always were. It is just that now their lies have been exposed for the whole world to see. It is impossible for lies to be propagated without those who participate in the lie, particularly if you know the authorities are lying. If you see lies being disseminated by the authorities and their lapdogs in the legacy media, yet say and do nothing to counter them, then you are participating in the lie, only to have become the lie yourself. You are then responsible for the lie, even though you didn't tell the lie yourself. So much more so because you knew the authorities were lying to manipulate you and your fellow man, yet did nothing. Next subtitle: Are actuarial analysts concerned over excess deaths post-2022, when the pandemic was largely over? Actuarial analysts have indeed expressed concerns over the continuing surge in excess mortality rates. Excess mortality is the difference between the total number of deaths for a specific time period and the number that would have been expected. Despite some signs of decline, life insurance executives and actuaries believe the numbers are alarming and could continue to impact earnings and increase death claims for years to come. In 2021, life insurers paid record levels of claims as the pandemic drove mortality higher. The industry distributed a record $100.28 billion in total death benefits, although the payouts fell during the first 9 months of 2022. They were still higher than the same period in 2019 before the pandemic hit. The Society of Actuaries found that in August of the previous year, 85% of its members thought excess mortality rates would continue to 2025. 2 months ago, the same poll found that 79% believe excess mortality rates will continue through 2026. However, some executives believe the current numbers are temporary or seasonal and don't require the industry to react. For instance, Fred Tavan, Chief Pricing Officer at Legal & General America, a major provider of term life insurance in the U.S., believes that the insured population will continue to see declining excess deaths over the next several years, reaching about zero excess deaths by 2030. Of course, I believe he's wrong, and what I'm about to read will also indicate that. All the links that Bing used for that, under that subtitle, listed below. You'll have to look at the blog, read the links, search the data for yourself. I don't want anyone to believe Bill Reimer. I want you to do your own research and look at the data and see what it tells you. Have there been access deaths not related to COVID? Is the next subtitle. Yes, actuarial analysis have indeed noticed a trend of access deaths unrelated to COVID-19. Access mortality is the difference between the total number of deaths for a specific time period and the number that would have been expected. While these numbers were forecasted to climb during the pandemic, some industry and health authorities are concerned that the rates haven't greatly diminished as COVID-19 infection rates have declined. There's the key. The mortality is still going up, but is not due to COVID. In addition to COVID-19, other factors could be contributing to access deaths. Some experts suggest regions including post-COVID-19 sequelae, conditions arising from COVID-19, or interactions with other causes of death, delayed deaths from other causes, delays in emergency care, delays in routine care, and increased use of drugs and alcohol. For instance, data from Canada showed that hundreds more Canadians died in the early weeks of the pandemic than in the same period in the previous years. But not all were directly connected to COVID-19. Similarly, data from the US showed that 18% of access deaths across the country last year were not assigned to COVID-19. These findings suggest that the pandemic's impact on mortality extends beyond the direct effects of the virus itself, and further investigation is needed to fully understand these trends. All the links from Bing, again, below that section. Next subtitle. Are actuarial analysts reporting access deaths in age groups and demographics hitherto unseen, particularly for heart disease? Yes, actuarial analysts have reported access deaths in age groups and demographics that were not typically associated with high mortality rates, particularly for heart disease. The Society of Actuaries, SOA, has been studying changes in rates of death by cause for 3 age and sex standardized cohorts: age groups 5 to 39, 40 to 74, and 75 to 94. Their findings indicate an increase in cardiac mortality across all ages. Even as deaths related to COVID-19 declined in 2022, deaths from other causes, including heart disease, stroke, diabetes, kidney and liver disease, rose. These observations suggest that the pandemic's impact on mortality extends beyond the direct effects of the virus itself. The reason for these trends are complex and could include factors such as delayed or disrupted healthcare pandemic. Notice it never blames the mRNA protocol. Never. The left makes sure that that's left out. All the links from Bing below that section under that subtitle. Next subtitle. Why are the legacy media outlets not reporting on this since the data is so alarming? Moreover, why is the government largely silent on the subject, given the findings indicate that citizens are dying at alarming rates for unusual causes? The issues of access death unrelated to COVID-19 is indeed being reported by some news outlets. However, the coverage may not be as widespread or as prominent as other news stories. There could be several reasons for this, and here artificial intelligence suggests some. I could suggest many more, but here's what it says. Complexity of the issue. The cause of these access deaths are complex and multifaceted, ranging from indirect consequences of the pandemic, such as missed or delayed medical interventions, to underreporting in the early phases of the pandemic. The complexity can make the issue more challenging to report on. Data availability. Detailed and accurate data on access deaths can take time to compile and analyze. Odd, of course, that the actuarial analysis have all this data. And now it says there's a lack of data. Which is it? Bing. For instance, it typically takes Statistics Canada up to a year to gather data about causes of death. Geez, I wonder why. Public interest. News outlets often prioritize stories based on their perceived relevance and interest to their audience. One would only assume that people dropping dead of unknown causes in hitherto unseen numbers would provoke a great deal of interest from the public. It's possible that other stories are seen as more immediately relevant or engaging. As for why the government isn't talking about it, it's important to note that public health agencies like StatsCan are indeed tracking and reporting on this data. No, they're not. When's the last time you read a report on access deaths that was published in a major newspaper in the legacy media? However, government officials and politicians may not be discussing it as prominently for a variety of reasons. Including the complexity of the issue, the need for more data and analysis, and the focus on other pressing public health concerns. Oh yes, people dropping dead in unusual numbers in hitherto unseen age groups and demographics. That hardly gets noticed by our corrupt and malfeasant political class. It's also possible that it's being discussed in certain forms or contexts that are not receiving widespread media coverage. Please note that this is a general explanation, and specifics can vary by region and over time for more accurate. And again, all the stuff from Bing. So now I begin with my summating thoughts, and then I'm going to get into a little testimony that won't be written here. These facts ought to terrify the living crap right out of you. The CBC has gone from being a watchdog to a lapdog. It now only does the bidding of the government to echo its sanctioned narrative. The CBC is proof that investigative journalism has perished under the knives of Trudeau's campaign of disinformation. But there is something much more alarming to me as a Christian believer. The church, which claims to preach the full gospel, namely the charismatic sects, are too busy putting bums in seats and building larger buildings to preach the truth. You cannot believe in the gospel of Christ and not warn the sisters and brothers of the lies being propagated by the totalizing enterprise of governments that no longer answer to their citizens, but rather to unelected players and foreign entities whose ideological ideas pose an extrinsic threat to peace, order, and good government. For those reading this, I will continue with a brief testimony. If you wish to hear it, tune into the vodcast, where I will provide my perspective on why I have come to believe that merely understanding that you are being lied to but doing nothing to counter it makes you equally responsible for propagating the lie. But here's a little excerpt from Alice's Restaurant. It will provide the setup for my testimony. This is the part where Arlo Guthrie, who had been arrested for littering, was being inducted into the Army. In Arlo's own words, he stopped me right there and said, "Kid, I want you to go over and sit down on that bench that says Group W." And I walked over to the bench there, and there's Group W is where they put you if you've not been moral enough to join the Army after committing your special crime. There are all kinds of mean, nasty, ugly-looking people on the bench there. There was mother rapers, father stabbers, father rapers sitting on the bench right there next to me. And they was mean and nasty and ugly and horrible, and crime-fighting guys were sitting there on the bench. And the meanest, ugliest, nastiest one, the meanest father raper of them all, was coming over to me And he was mean and ugly and nasty and horrible and all kinds of things. And he sat down next to me. And he said, "Kid, what'd you get?" And I said, "I didn't get nothing. I had to pay $50 and pick up the garbage." He said, "What were you arrested for, kid?" And I said, "Littering." And they all moved away from me. On the bench over there were the hairy eyeball and all kinds of mean, nasty things till I said, "And creating a nuisance." And they all came back, shook my hand, and we had a great time on the bench talking about crime, mother stabbing, father raping, all kinds of groovy things. And we was talking about on the bench, and everything was fine. So God bless you all with the knowledge of the truth, so that you may be forged into a weapon which will defeat the pernicious false doctrines of the enemy of our souls. So my testimony, I mentioned in my New Year's vodcast that I had gone down to Niagara in '98. I had started a concert series, which eventually ended up featuring the rhythm section from Downchild Blues Band, the band that indeed gave Danny Aykroyd and John Belushi the idea for the Blues Brothers movie. After I was no longer capable of running that series, my former bandmates took it over, and it lives on today in perfectly good health. But I didn't choose to visit them. There were two other shows that started in competition to the one that I had begun, and they live on in perfectly good health as well. So I chose to visit them. The one is hosted by Brent Parker. He was the guy that moved into my loft after I had moved to Norway. I took his bass player aside and started discussing some of this stuff with him. And of course, he accused me of being a conspiracy theorist. You can see that this data has nothing to do with conspiracies or with me thinking things that aren't factual. This is all based on actuarial analysis. But when Brent Parker saw me talking to his bass player, Al Duffy, he moved away on the Group W bench. It absolutely kills me. And then poor Limpy, the guitar player with the series that I started, he took a heart attack just before the gig and died. Now, Limpy's my age. I don't assume that, well, one just doesn't know, but doesn't it seem ironic? All these unusual deaths. You know, musicians used to pride themselves on being individualistic and hating the man. You know, down with the man, down with the machine, down with the neo-fascist military-industrial complex that seeks to perpetrate its vast fraud against the working masses. And now, these idiots are participating in the lies that the man is telling. And not only that, but if you say, "Hey, you're repeating a lie and I can prove it," oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. They want nothing to do with me. Irony of all ironies. I hired these guys and paid them more money than I paid myself when I was booking gigs. And now they can't stand me for one simple reason. I won't tell a lie. Okay? I'm going to tell the truth. May God forge me into a weapon that will defeat the lies of the enemy of our souls. And you plenty costalls that sit there in your pew and scream hallelujah while slapping people on the forehead, yet can't tell the truth about what's happening today. And the fact that the government and these international entities, whether they're in Davos or their association with Beijing and the Communist Party of China, 75% of all global, China, India, and Russia, yes, emit 75% of all global emissions. 75% of all. So it's not Europe, it's not North America that are polluting the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. And of course, the other thing about of all the greenhouse gases that are deadly, CO2 is likely the least deadly. And the one that we need to be least concerned about. It is impossible to convert matter into energy without byproducts. It defies the laws of physics. Thermodynamics dictates, the laws of thermodynamics dictate that every time matter is converted into energy, there will be byproducts. They want us to live poor, smaller, more impoverished lives, locked into 15-minute cities where we're forced out of fellowship with others, just like they did during COVID. Do not participate in this lie. Please grow a backbone and ask God to give you the wherewithal to speak the truth in love to others. God bless you. We'll see you next time right here at the Food for the Faithful channel with me, Bill Reimer, your reluctant prophet.